There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right, let the King of Glory in. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates. Prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ, and he heard a sound behind him and said, "Behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven, and I heard a voice, which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, 'Come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place.'" That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us, the things that the Word of God foretells would come to pass, those things which must take place, those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about, discussing the issues of the day, discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. I am streaming live, of course, over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. Go on over to facebook.com/faithfm91.7. And if you never liked the page, please like the page, but also drop some comments there, some questions. Let me know where you're watching from, where you're listening from, over there on the Facebook page. If you're outside of the Faith FM broadcast area, the best way to listen to Faith FM is to download the free app. We have the app both for the Android and, of course, the Apple platforms. Just look it up in your respective app supplier. Just look up Sag Harbor and look up Sag Harbor. Look up Faith FM in Sag Harbor, because there's other Faith FMs around the country with apps as well. But we are in Sag Harbor on the east end of Long Island. And we're streaming live across the internet, of course, all across the fruited plain, all around the spherical globe. Best way to listen to us 24/7 if you're outside of the broadcast area is through the app. I plan on going to the phones in the second hour. If you want to write down the phone number, 631-725-2069, 631-725-2069. And it's going to be a very, very important broadcast today. I think they're all important, of course. I mean, to be honest with you, I think they're all important. But I'm really going to ask right up front that you please would share this. Those of you who are watching it real time right now, please share the URL around. Please copy and paste the URL and just share it and invite people on over to the broadcast and increase the audience size. But especially after we upload these broadcasts onto my different video platforms, I would ask that you share them. I want to get some facts out there today. I want to get some real pushback against some of the lies and accusations that are endlessly hurled at Israel regarding the genocide. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Before I get to that, though, I want to give a real quick update on the pro-Israel rally that's been going on in Sag Harbor every Sunday for the last few weeks, and they plan on continuing these rallies right up into the Labor Day weekend, from what I can tell. And I shared last week how a bunch of us went a few weeks back. About 5 or 6 of us went, and last week it was great. Over a dozen of us went out there to stand with the Jewish community here in Sag Harbor as they counter-protest a pro-Palestinian group that's on the other side of the street. I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to encourage people. It was really another great time, and it's a great way to build bridges and not build walls, and to lots of us in the Christian community, a lot of us will say we stand with Israel, and a lot of it becomes just rhetoric without actions or just an emotional thing. But right now, you have an opportunity to literally stand with Israel, stand with the Jewish community, and push back against the lies. It's a pro-Israel rally up at the end of Main Street on Sag Harbor right by the windmill there. I know there's the name of that park. I can't think of the name of the park. But if anybody wants to come out, they meet only for an hour on Sundays. The group only meets there from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And again, it's just a great light. It's a great way to build, to take a stand for the truth in a peaceful manner. So I just wanted to give that as a quick update. Again, we just had a lot of good interactions. We had fun. We just had fun joining with the local Jewish community here to take a stand for the truth. But as I was saying a moment ago, on the other side of the street are the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters with their propaganda signs reading "Stop the Genocide" and their chants of, stop the genocide, like a bunch of lemmings and parrots. They're just chanting "Stop the Genocide." And you know what? I was thinking about it. I agree. I agree. The Palestinians, with their Hamas charter, need to stop the genocide that they are waging, planning, and wish to inflict against Israel. Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, they all need to stop their genocidal wars against the Jews. Yeah, I agree. They won't, of course. They won't, of course. But as far as Gaza goes, there is, to be clear, there is, and there never was any Israeli genocide going on against the Gazans, nor was there a famine going on against the Gazans, at least not one that was caused by Israel. Facts matter, folks. Facts matter. And on this broadcast today, as I shared a moment ago off air, it's going to be a very factual and fact-directed broadcast that is very important. I would ask you to share it around once I've got it uploaded on my various video platforms, because we're going to take a look at some of the facts today. As Officer Joe Friday on that old TV show Dragnet would famously say, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. You see, the left is relentlessly pushing the genocide lie narrative. It's the new blood libel of choice that the media has helping them, the leftist media has been helping them on this narrative. And unfortunately, in this present climate, facts and truth itself is often dismissed as propaganda, while lies are consumed and believed as fact. To quote Charles Spurgeon, he said, "A lie will go around the world while truth is pulling its boots on." I don't know if he was the one who originally said it. Lots of people have said it in one way or another. But it's true. A lie will go around the world while truth is pulling its boots on. And those who have participated in the genocide lie, the big lie, as we should call it, have not made an honest mistake. You might say, well, some people, they believe a genocide is going on because it's what they hear. Well, that's very Hitler-esque, the way the media has been producing it. But most of these people have not made an honest mistake, but they have purposefully perpetrated a Hitler-esque quintessential example of the big lie. Hitler's belief was that the bigness of the lie not only lends it credibility, but serves as an emotional rather than a rational appeal. And that's one of the major hurdles, honestly. People are buying into the genocide lie based on the repetition of the lie and the emotions it invokes, but they're not basing it on factual reasoning. And since so many agenda-driven anti-Zionists have been accusing Israel of genocide since the war started, really from the first day the war broke out, they were accusing Israel of genocide and not Hamas, the ones who perpetrated it. I mean, this is how pre-planned this propaganda was. But the problem has become the emotionalism and the repetition of the lie. And again, since so many agenda-driven anti-Zionists, as I said a second ago, have been accusing Israel of genocide, many have become immune to facts. And I'm here to tell you today that accusing Israel of genocide is an effective weapon of the anti-Zionist propaganda outlets and podcast influences, knowing full well that they can exploit the historical ignorance of the imbecilic anti-Semites. Listen, folks, accusing Israel of genocide has become their blood libel of choice, while they conveniently forget that it was Hamas that initiated a genocidal war on Israel on October 7th of 2023. It's not Israel. The eradication of Israel and the extermination of Jews has been the long-range plan and goal of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority since their creation. It is something that is enshrined and codified within their own charter. So let's this fact be stated over and over again. Hamas's stated purpose, along with Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian Authority, is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the eradication of the Jewish people. They've said it in their own documents time and time and time again, not to mention their own religious books like the Quran and the Hadith, which we won't get into that right now. But here's the point. It's their religion. The elimination of the state of Israel, the elimination of the Jews, it's their religion and their ideology. And that is precisely why they can't be negotiated with, at least not until they renounce and repent of their visceral hatred of the Jews. It's to negotiate with people who want to kill you is an exercise in futility. And to think that any negotiations will produce anything lasting as long as they don't renounce what I just said ago, their own charters, their own ideology, it's useless. Because, and here's the thing, the very ones shouting, "Stop the genocide," the loudest, are the very ones whose ideology is calling for it in regards to the Jewish nation. But let's be factually clear regarding Gaza. Let's get beyond the rhetoric and into some facts. Because there hasn't been and never was a genocide occurring in Gaza. And Hamas's own stats and reporting prove it when you look at the data that they themselves have released, as well as UNRWA's, which is an organization. UNRWA, we've talked about them many times, is an organization within the United Nations. Their own latest report. UNRWA is the United Nations agency responsible for Palestinian refugees. And it released its report recently. They do it every year or every couple of years on the number of Palestinian refugees. In 2022, this is their numbers. This is their numbers of registered Palestinian refugees, and it's more than Gaza. It's really the whole Mideast there, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq. It's all those who claim to be Palestinian refugees. So they keep track of this. So here's the point. And again, this came from UNRWA's own web pages. These are the sources for these numbers. Not some right-wing, pro-Israel, pro-Zionist group. This is UNRWA's numbers. In their 2022 report, before the Hamas attack on Israel, there were 5,747,065 Palestinian refugees registered with UNRWA. In their latest report, which came out near the end of 2025, that was their latest report. Remember, this is now 3 years after the quote-unquote genocide, so to speak. The new number of registered refugees is 5,795,136. That's more registered Palestinian quote-unquote refugees, 48,071 more than in 2022. In other words, the numbers have gone up of those quote-unquote Palestinians. Now, that's not a genocide. That's an increase in numbers. Now, you might say, well, the refugees are, the way, they're not just talking about refugees that like flee. They're using the word very broadly. It's almost in some ways a census of registered people who are claiming themselves to be Palestinian, no matter where they live. Again, these numbers are a compilation of several nations, including Gaza. But you see, a genocide would mean that the numbers would be going down irrespective of where they are. But there's more. Because Hamas's Ministry of Health list, which they also recently released, Hamas's Ministry of Health list proves the quote-unquote genocide narrative is a total fabrication and pure propaganda. Hamas has wrapped up its latest revision of casualty data in the Gazan war. And when you look at the numbers they put out, it makes clear why Israel's critics really have been kind of flailing around, even increasing, doubling down on the propaganda, because the facts contradict what they're saying. Hamas's facts. The list that Hamas has put out has enough information to cite 68,800 deaths. Now, the number of dead that in Gaza that's commonly reported in the media is around 73,000. Yet Hamas is claiming 68,000. So there's this little disparate number between Hamas's own numbers and what the media is reporting, because they want to, even inflate those numbers. But I saw somebody post the other day that Israel killed 73. Maybe they just made a mistake. They don't know that, what 3 zeros after a number is less than 4 zeros after a number. I don't know. I saw somebody the other day say that Israel killed, over 7 million Palestinians. If that was true, that would have been a genocide, because there's only about 2.5 Palestinians in Gaza anyway. But I'll get to those numbers later. Point being is that the numbers of deaths range between 68,800 according to Hamas and 73,000, which is a questionable number to begin with. But out of those numbers, here's where we get into the weeds a little bit of these stats. Hamas admits that at least 25,000 to 35,000 of that number were Hamas fighters. This is where it gets interesting, folks, because that leaves anywhere from 38,000 to 44,000 deaths to account for. And included in that number are about 10,000 natural deaths. And another thing you got to understand about Hamas, about the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is run by Hamas, is that when they take these numbers of deaths, they include everybody. Natural deaths, civilian deaths, combatant deaths. So it's just one big number without being broken down necessarily. Well, they do break it down, but not in the media. So we got to account for, when these people say stop the genocide and millions of Palestinians, millions of Gazans have been killed by the Israelis. It's a lie. It's propaganda. And we can start breaking these numbers down, again, based on Hamas's own reporting. Because the remaining roughly 34,000 lives that do include civilians killed by Israel and those killed by Hamas and associated militant groups. Remember, Hamas and Islamic Jihad were killing Palestinians themselves. And that they've got footage of that. They've got videos of that. Sometimes rockets were misfired. They were firing rockets into Israel, and the rockets would fall on. Remember when the rocket fell on the Gazan hospital? Israel was blamed for it, but it was proven later it was a Hamas missile. So again, these civilian lives aren't only killed by Israeli mishaps or whatever you might say. It's a conglomerate number, and people were killed either by execution of Hamas and Islamic Jihad themselves, rocket misfires, their own little turf wars, things like that. And those casualties are overwhelmingly the ones, by the way, all of these innocent civilians, by the way, all of these casualties are overwhelmingly, and this is a point, overwhelmingly the ones that Hamas purposely put in harm's way as human shields and fodder for propaganda. Their blood is on the hands of Hamas. Facts matter. But obviously, facts don't matter to lying psychopaths suffering from incurable anti-Semitic brain rot. The point is this. The result is that even when using Hamas's numbers, Israel's civilian to combatant death rate is close to a 1-to-1 ratio. That is an amazing, unheard of accomplishment in urban warfare setting, and they can't get around this. Most civilian to combatant death rates in any war is anywhere from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1. Given the fact that Hamas started the war, given the fact that Hamas refused to surrender, given the fact that they fired at Israel from civilian homes, the terrible tragedy of Gazan lives lost must be and should be laid at Hamas's feet. Furthermore, some of the other propaganda that's going out. I know I'm getting into the weeds of a lot of these facts, but they need to be put out there. That's why this broadcast is going to be so important, so that you have the facts and you could share this around. Because the demographics, put out by the Ministry of Health itself demonstrates a much higher share of adult men, 18-year-olds to 59-year-olds, and older teenage boys relative to their share of the population, and a much lower share of women and children. And there's a chart. You can't see the chart, but I have the chart in front of me. The chart was put out by the Gazan Ministry of Health, and it totally contradicts. We've been hearing the big lie that we keep hearing from the propaganda machine on the left is that the majority of the deaths are women and children. It's not true. The demographic chart put out by the Gaza Ministry of Health flatly contradicts that false narrative. Israel's committing genocide. It's a lie. It's a malignant one. And once again, I keep saying this, Hamas's own numbers obliterate the lies that Western anti-Zionists cling to. Why do you never hear about real genocides that are occurring from these people? In Sudan, over 1 million people have been displaced and tens of thousands killed in a war nobody protests. In Yemen, starvation and bombings have dwarfed Gaza. Never see these pro-Palestinian Gaza people protesting Yemen. In Syria, 500,000 lives were lost, and minorities like the Druze were crushed. In Congo, millions are dead, and there's nothing but silence. You don't see any demonstrations on the street protesting the genocide in Congo. Nigeria, that I've talked about so often. North Korea, Asia, Christians are slaughtered and churches burned. So why are these people only talking about Gaza? And not only talking about Gaza, why are they lying? Why are they lying? Why is Israel singled out? Well, we all know the answer to that. The saying is true. No Jews, no news. You know that saying? It's true. No Jews, no news. And if the news does show any signs of a contradiction of their narrative, or any inconvenient truths, like the Ministry of Health's own documentation, well, they'll just spin it. They'll just spin it and blame the Jews anyway. Just remember, leftist logic goes something like this. When Islamic terrorists commit 48,000 plus attacks in 70 plus countries since 9/11 alone, not a single Muslim is to blame, including the terrorists themselves. It's America's fault, or it's Israel's fault. But when Israel inadvertently kills innocent people while engaged in an existential war against maniacs, every single Jew is to blame, including 3-year-olds in Australia and 90-year-olds in Lithuania. That's how their propaganda machine works. Do you have any questions? If you do, I'll be back with more. We will dance again. The fusion of heart, mind, and soul, because music is what feelings sound like. Welcome back, Andy White here on the radio, tearing down strongholds. You're listening to Open Up the Doors, Integrity in Broadcasting, here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. I'm here penetrating the unseen powers of darkness, sending powers and principalities into frothy fits of frenzy by simply speaking the light of truth. And the light of truth is this: there is no genocide committed by Israel against the Gazans. Let me give you the legal definition, the UN legal definition of what a genocide is. The legal definition in the 1948 Genocide Convention: genocide means acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Israel is fighting a war of self-defense. I like the first line of that song. You say genocide, I say war. Israel is fighting a war of self-defense, which Hamas initiated. You need to understand differences between war and genocide. It's ironic that the modern state of Israel was born in part out of a real genocide, not a genocide against Palestinian Arabs, but a genocide of European Jews. And for that reason, Jews know better than most people on the planet what the real meaning of the word genocide is. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum defines genocide basically using the same words as the UN Convention, and an internationally recognized crime where acts are committed with intent to destroy. Intent is the word. Intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. To commit genocide, there must be a deliberate effort to annihilate a specific people group on a large scale. Is that what's happening in Gaza? No, it's not. Is the IDF attempting to eradicate a whole people group? No, they're not. Believe me, if they wanted to, they actually really could. No, what's actually happening in Gaza is not an attempt to commit genocide. It's a war against a hostile terrorist organization, military, and government. And the international attempt to rebrand Israel's response as a ruthless genocide is simply perverse propaganda. It's not true. Israel is not committing genocide. They are or were at war. And to add to that, because remember, we're going into the numbers that Hamas themselves have put out. And I know that it can get a little dry listening to statistics and metrics on the radio. I can't show you the graphs that they put out, but they're there. You can find them. But it is an undeniable fact that Hamas used Palestinian civilians as human shields. It was part of their plan, and they admitted it themselves. An interviewer recently posed a question to Musa Abu Mazouk, who's a senior member of the Hamas Politburo. And the question was this: since you have built 500 kilometers of tunnels, why haven't you built bomb shelters where civilians can hide during bombardments? Abu Mazouk said the tunnels are, quote, meant to protect us. Who's the us? Hamas combatants. Who cares about the civilians? They are meant to protect us. I mean, at least he was transparent. They are meant to protect us from Israeli aircraft and facilitate attacks on Israeli targets. Again, us meaning Hamas, not civilians. Hamas chose not to build bomb shelters in Gaza. What happened here? Weird stuff. Things coming up on my now why did it do that? My notes just like totally disappeared. Anyway, Hamas, I'll go off my notes. Hamas chose to build tunnels and not bomb shelters. You know, Israel builds a lot of bomb shelters around Israel. In fact, I've sent money. I'm not boasting of myself, but I've sent money to different organizations to help build bomb shelters in Israel because they want to protect their people from what they know was coming and is coming. So the question from this interview was like, well, why haven't you done that? Well, they're meant to protect us, you know, the leadership. We don't care about the civilians. This is the mindset that you're dealing with. Hamas chooses not to build bomb shelters in Gaza because that would undercut its ability to use the population as human shields. By putting civilians in or above military positions, which they do, Hamas knows it cannot lose the propaganda war. Either it will prevent Israel from attacking, since Israel is not intending to kill civilians. The Israeli military tries to minimize harms to civilians. It's a fact. They send out leaflets when they're about to attack a building. They literally call up people on their cell phones saying, we're going to attack this position or this building. If you're a civilian, get out of there. Nobody does that. Only Israel does that. But you never hear about this in the media. If Israel does attack, again, the use of human shields then ensures high civilian casualties. Hamas can then hold the death toll against Israel while generating sympathy for itself. See, emotionalism over reasoning. Yahya Sinwar, leader, or former leader, I should say, until the Israelis sent him home to go meet his 72 virgins. But Yahya Sinwar, who was the mastermind behind, in many ways, behind the October 7th attacks, claimed Palestinian civilian deaths were, quote unquote, a necessary sacrifice. They admit it. They admit it. Why these pro-Palestinian stop the genocide people never want to bring that up? I don't even know. Again, they don't want to deal with facts. They just want to deal with emotion. They just want to buy into the propaganda. Hamas and its partners. This is coming from the UN. They've documented this. Again, this isn't some pro-Israel publication. This is the UN. But Hamas and its partners frequently shoot at their own civilians to keep them from getting to safety or receiving aid. And then they blame Israel for the deaths. We know, because we've seen the videos many, many, many times. The late Senator Lindsey Graham said not that long ago, obviously before he died, he said this, quote, the most radicalized population on the planet is young people in Gaza. From the time they are born to the time they die, they are taught to kill and hate the Jews. And he's 100% correct. Again, there are literally hundreds of videos across the social media platforms showing Palestinian children being indoctrinated with Jew hatred from a very early age and being trained to wage war and kill Jews. It's truly despicable, and it's truly heartbreaking to see innocent children being groomed to be genocidal terrorists. It reminds me of what Golda Meir once said. We will only have peace with the Arabs when they love their children more than they hate us. There's no famine. There were wide reports of famine in Gaza for months. You know, the New York Times ran a bogus picture which they had to retract. But Israel has sent over 2 million tons into Gaza. but very little of it, almost none of it, was even getting to the people or the hostages, because Hamas was constantly stealing it and using it for their own Hamas militants. They weren't giving it to the people, or they would sell it to the people. Millions of tons of food that Israel and the UN shipped there, and yet the narrative was, oh, there's a famine. It was a despicable lie, and if to anyone who was starving, it was because of Hamas. But it was made again. We got to push through the lies. Right now, and I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to probably carry this into the second hour, but right now, the United States is blocking, not the United States, I'm sorry, the United Nations is blocking a U.S. investigation into alleged links between these aid groups in Gaza and Hamas, like UNRWA. And writing on X, Ted Cruz said that the American taxpayer shouldn't, our money, and of course I shared this a couple of weeks ago, that we're going to stop funding UNRWA by the end of the year. Trump stopped the funding in his first term, and then Biden reinstated it, and it needs to be on until the end of the year. But tax dollars were supporting literally UNRWA, which should be itself designated a terrorist group. And right now, they're being investigated by U.S. Aid Inspector General. But the UN is blocking the investigation, stonewalling the investigation. Why? Because it contradicts the narrative, and it shows the complicity. It shows the complicity of the UN, or at the very least UNRWA, in the propaganda as well as the literal helping of the terrorists. They were part of the terrorists. They were embedded with the terrorists. I think the number was something like 1,400 or something like that. 1,400 UNRWA. I might have that number wrong, but hundreds of UNRWA members were literally involved with the October 7th attack against Israel. Again, I'm going to take a break. But we know that Satan is a liar and a deceiver. And he knows how to really flip the script. Call a lie the truth and call the truth a lie. And Satan makes the Gazans, through the propagandists and the propaganda machines, he makes the Gazans, who literally have genocidal intentions, into the victims of the Israelis who have no genocidal intentions. Again, to fully quote what Golda Meir said, we can forgive the Arabs for killing our children. We cannot forgive them for forcing us to kill their children. We will only have peace with the Arabs when they love their children more than they hate us. By me sharing these numbers, it's not to diminish the lives lost of those who may truly have been innocent. Sure, there were some. Again, people being forced to be human shields, Hamas using people for propaganda fodder. But one thing you got to remember, and it can't be dismissed, is that even after October 7th happened and all the atrocities committed against Israel were recorded and shown on video, again, captured on video by the Hamas fighters themselves, all of the horrific acts that they committed, acts of genocide that Hamas committed. Even after that, polls were taken amongst the Gazan population, and 70 to almost 80% of them still said they would vote for Hamas again. That says something, folks. That really says something. I'll be back in a minute.
Your king
The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM. WEGB 90.7. WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. WEGB is 90.7, 93.3 in that peak, by the way. Kind of blew over that pretty quickly. Let me give you some broadcast memos here. The first hour of this broadcast re-airs today at 3 p.m., Thursday at 1 p.m., also on Saturday. If you missed any part of the broadcast, again, please go on over. You can find us over on my video platforms over on YouTube and Rumble. If you ever like those, if you happen to be there, just subscribe and you'll be able to stay in contact with me and network with us. It's all about resourcing and networking together. I want to bring up something. Mark your calendars down. I'll be sharing about this in the weeks ahead too. But if you're on the east end of Long Island, if you're a local listener here, we have one in May, and we're going to have another gathering at the end of this month, a Pray for America gathering. This month's Pray for America gathering will be held Sunday, August 23rd, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Community Christian Fellowship in Mattituck. If you'd like more information, contact me, text me, email me, and I'll give you more information on that. But I want to encourage, the body of Christ to come out and pray. We're going to pray for our communities. We're going to pray for our churches. We're going to pray for our nation as the body of Christ. If you believe in prayer, come on out. If you're a church leader, please come on out. We need to lead by example. Bring your people from the church. Again, it's Sunday, August 23rd at Community Christian Fellowship in Mattituck. I do plan on going to the phones in the second hour. The phone number is 631-725-2069. I'll take your phone calls, and I'll also continue on with getting into some of the things I've been sharing. I think I'm going to revisit some of those things. I kind of glossed over some of the reports for the sake of time in this first hour. I think I might revisit them, but I've only got a few minutes left here in this first hour. But I want to give you some, again, numbers, facts matter in combating the genocide lie. In 1948, at the birth of Israel, there were only 200,000 to 250,000 so-called Palestinians in Gaza. Remember, back in those days, even Jews were called Palestinians because it was just a reference to the region and not to any particular ethnic group. A Palestinian isn't even an ethnicity. But the term has been hijacked and politicized. But there were 200,000, 250,000 Palestinians, those who would be called Palestinian by today's standards, in Gaza. 200,000, 250,000 in Gaza. By 2023, there were more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And here's where it gets, again, interesting. There were about just over 2 million Palestinians in Gaza before the war. The most recent official estimate from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics at the end of 2025, 8 months ago, and the war has been at a ceasefire basically, except for skirmishes where Hamas still fires on Israel and they respond. It's officially a ceasefire, so officially a quote-unquote board of peace is trying to sort things out. But I digress. There were 2 million Palestinians in Gaza before the war. The Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics at the end of 2025 puts the Gaza Strip's population at about 2.13 million. What? That's a slight increase. Or at least status quo. Now, figures can vary slightly depending on the source and the exact date, but I'm reading these numbers from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, and they're putting the population at 2.13 million. Those numbers, my friends, are hardly evidence of a genocide. In fact, as genocide goes, that would be the most inept genocide in history. But again, they weren't trying to commit genocide. Another thing, a bit of an aside, because again, I gave you the UN's definition of genocide earlier, and it's about erasing and eradicating a specific group of people. Remember, Palestinians there is no Palestinian ethnicity. They're Arabs. And I'm saying that for this reason. If Israel had an intention of genocide, it's worth noting that while the Palestinians do not recognize Jewish ties to the land, Israel, it's worth noting that the Palestinians want a Jew-free state. They want the eradication and elimination of the Jews. Yet, there are more than 2 million Muslim Arabs living peacefully and safely inside Israel as full citizens with equal rights. Yet, stop the genocide. It's an absurdity. It's an absurdity. It's a lie. And the propagandists, unfortunately, pick up on defamatory and malicious lies from useful idiots that they can find. Like what I saw in Yeni Shafak the other day, a meme with, lo and behold, whose face was on this meme and who were they quoting? This guy named Norman Finkelstein. I did a thing on Norman Finkelstein about a year ago. He's a self-loathing Jew. He's a phony, dishonest, and discredited fake historian. I did a whole expose on him a year ago. But it's morons like this guy that feeds and gives fodder to anti-Semites and anti-Semitic propaganda machines like Yeni Shafak. They posted a meme of Finkelstein saying, quote, American Jewish scholar. He's discredited, but this was their propaganda. American Jewish scholar, Professor Norman Finkelstein said, quote, Israel kills children as a hobby. The problem is not Netanyahu. It's Israeli society as a whole. I almost fell out of my chair when I saw this. What a stupendously horrific thing to say. What a lie. Coming from a bogus and demonstrably discredited fake historian. And I'm not going to get into all the things that I did on Finkelstein over a year ago. But the irony and the hypocrisy. Finkelstein is an ardent Maoist communist, self-described Maoist. He describes himself as an old-fashioned communist in the sense that he sees no value whatsoever in states. So he's also a neo-anarchist. But this guy's got the chutzpah to accuse Israel of genocide when he is an avowed Maoist. Think of that, folks. Mao, who slaughtered somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 50 million of his own people. You can't make up this insanity. Leftism is truly a mental disorder. As I said a moment ago, Israel is the only nation that warns civilians to evacuate before they attack. The media rarely ever reports on how millions of phone calls go out and text messages are issued to Israel, to Gazan civilians, warning them to evacuate apartment buildings. An action inconsistent with a government that's supposedly trying to maximize the loss of life and commit genocide. As I said a moment ago in the last block, Israel has the lowest civilian to combatant death rate of any other nation. It's a statistical fact. I'm out of time. I'm going to pick this up on the other side. But the genocide lie, it's demonic. It's a filthy lie from hell, and I, for one, am going to push back against it. And I want to have an educated audience. It's as simple as that. To quote Winston Churchill, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. Brothers and sisters, be informed with the facts and don't get caught with your pants down. I'll be back. And I'm back for the second hour of Open Up the Doors, the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. Welcome back, everybody. Those of you who hung out from the first hour, welcome back. Those of you who might just be joining in, welcome aboard. We'd love to go to the phones if you'd like to call in. Lines are open as of the moment, 631-725-2069, 631-725-2069. I am back to streaming over on my Open Up the Doors page. If you'd like to go on over there, let me know where you're watching from, where you're listening from. The Open Up the Doors page is at facebook.com/faithfm91.7. That's facebook.com/faithfm91.7. Join in the conversation over there, or even better yet, give me a call. And, you can input what I've shared with you. I'm going to continue to share a few things. I'm going to backtrack on a few things and get into some more of the facts of the matter and what's going on, because it's important. And I want to say a few things. It's incredibly hard. You have no idea. It is incredibly hard to do a broadcast like this. It's not cheery and gleeful, and you can get lost in the weeds and the statistics, but more so than any of that, I can literally feel the oppression. I can feel the powers and the principalities, even as I push back on the lies and the anti-Semitism, the anti-Zionism, and the lies of the left. But those lies are influenced. Those lies are inculcated through the spirit of the age, through the spirit of Antichrist, through the powers and principalities, the spiritual host of wickedness that we wage war against in the heavenly realms. I feel that oppression. I can feel it. Because they don't want the truth to come out. They don't want, they don't want their lies to be exposed. So I ask for your prayers. I ask that even the things I share would be shared with clarity, so you can lay hold of them. We need to speak against the lie. Only truth will combat a lie, and we need to take a stand. So I'm just sharing that because it is incredibly difficult, and there are things I would much rather really talk about. In all honesty, things that are more joyful, things that aren't so dark, things that aren't so intense. But these are the times in which we live. And these are the platforms that God has given us, me especially here with this radio broadcast, that I must be, faithful to. And like I said at the close of the first hour, the genocide lie, it's demonic, folks. It's a filthy lie from hell that we need to stand against. And I want this audience, as I did share, but if you missed it, I'll say it again, because I want this audience to be an educated audience. Because leftists, anti-Semites are so gullible and quick to believe the propaganda coming out of Hamas and the Palestinian lobby. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But in some ways you got to give it to the left. You really got to give it to their propaganda machine in some ways. They really, really know how to weave and spread a lie. They really know how to do it. They do it really well. They really know how to drown out the truth with their fabrications and obfuscations and disseminations. That's why I think that broadcasts like this are very, very important. To be a resource for you, so that when you come against these things, or when you have to deal with these things, maybe talking to family members or friends, you're not going to remember all these stats. I don't remember all these stats as I walk around in my daily life. Some of them I remember, but this broadcast like this is meant to give you tools and weapons and a resource to go back and take notes, or to go back and share with your friends, especially as we get into some of these facts. I mentioned a lot of things, but the UN right now is stonewalling the investigation into its dealings with Hamas through UNRWA, and they don't want the facts out there. And Ted Cruz is leading the way and getting this out there. The U.S. Aid Inspector General's investigation into UNRWA is called Operation Stop the Carousel. It was initiated last year to root out Hamas-linked UNRWA staffers in the UN and stop them from migrating to other UN agencies once UNRWA is shut down. UN agencies that perform work in Gaza, specifically with using taxpayer funds. And this is why we're involved with it. Our money is being used to, in so many ways, to help the propaganda machine and to fund the terrorists. And the United Nations stonewalling of this investigation is really just inflaming more and more tensions within the Trump administration as it works to dismantle UNRWA. Like I said, Trump is looking to dismantle UNRWA. He's looking to pull the U.S. out of it, slash U.S. support to these agencies and other agencies as well, known for pushing an anti-Israel agenda, such as the International Criminal Court, which we're not a part of either. You know about the ICC because Mamdani was saying he was going to enforce an ICC warrant for arrest of Netanyahu when he comes here in September. We don't recognize the ICC. It's another corrupt anti-Semitic institution, organization, the International Criminal Court. They have no jurisdiction here, and Mamdani had to finally admit that and back down. But a senior State Department official said, "We have seen so many times that UNRWA is a subsidiary of Hamas, and it aided and abetted terrorist activity, including October 7th. It is incumbent on all UN agencies to provide requested information to ensure that taxpayers never pay the salaries of terrorists. And never again will the United States accept UN agencies' failures to screen employees that wear dual hats as terrorists." The report noted that since Hamas's October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack, the report says no UN agency has self-reported to U.S. aid or U.S. aid organizations. They're supposed to self-report. This is the point. They're supposed to give out the reports quarterly, bi-monthly, whatever. But they haven't done it since the attack. They haven't self-reported on any instance in which Hamas interfered in the delivery of aid, even though a mounting body of evidence, including evidence from the United Nations, confirms that Hamas was interfering with aid delivery and looting supplies. Remember when the media kept saying, "Oh, Israel's not sending in humanitarian aid." They were sending humanitarian aid in by the truckload. Millions of pounds of food, millions of pounds. Hamas was interfering with it. Hamas was looting it. And the UN admits it. These are the facts that we need to put out there, because we were repeatedly and insistently told that there was a famine in Gaza caused by Israel because they're committing genocide, despite over 2 million tons of food being sent by both Israel and the UN. Yet none of it was even getting, or very, very little of it was even getting to the people or the hostages. Again, pushing back against a despicable lie. If you'd like to call in, phone lines are open, 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. The U.S. State Department Human Rights Report. This is, again, quoting, Hamas interfered with the movement of civilian and humanitarian workers inside Gaza, setting up roadblocks and attempting to block humanitarian workers inside buildings to prevent them from leaving areas that Israel announced it would bombard. Even UN Secretary Council Antonio Guterres has repeatedly even admitted that. He admitted that, quote, this is the UN Secretary General. This isn't somebody, from a platform at AIPAC or something that they'll blame, the Jewish lobby. This is the Secretary of the UN, who I don't have a whole lot of respect for to begin with, but let's use what they're saying. Quote, Hamas and other militants use civilians as human shields and continue to launch rockets indiscriminately towards Israel. He admitted it. And one of the reasons he had to admit it was because the organizer, so to speak, well, not so to speak, he was the brainchild, Yahya Sinwar, as I said in the first hour. After he was killed, they found his writings. They found records that he was keeping, and they found documents from Yahya Sinwar that revealed the depth of his depravity and the extent to which he knowingly steered Gaza toward catastrophe. You never hear about this in the news. You never hear about the documents that they found. Handwritten notes drafted a year before the attack show Sinwar, he anticipated. He baited Israel. He baited them. He anticipated a ferocious Israeli counteroffensive, even speculating in his own words about the possibility that maybe even Israel might use a nuclear bomb in its retaliation on Gaza. They wouldn't, but he was almost hoping they would. Why? Because their hatred is so deep, and they want to bait Israel into being hated by the world. They want to use it as propaganda. And according to his handwritten notes, despite the uncertainty over whether Iran or Hezbollah would even join the fight, Sinwar outlined a plan to deploy up to 10,000 fighters. Now, they said about 3,000 roughly breached the fence and the wall in Israel on that day. But he had a plan to deploy 10,000 fighters from Gaza to seize Israeli towns, expel civilians, hold hostages, and wage what he described as a life or death battle. These notes that they found, these documents that they found, they align with earlier documents from Sinwar's archives detailing his intent. Remember, I gave you the definition of genocide. It's an intention that the IDF never has nor has. An intention to murder, to plunder, to eradicate another ethnic group of people. An intention that Israel does not have, never had. But an intention that Sinwar and Hamas does have. The document showed his intent to use extreme brutality to maximize terror, fear, and psychological trauma among Israelis. That they succeeded in doing. That's why they were wearing body cams during the massacre of women and children, families and elderly people and rapes. The stuff is disgusting, and it's all on video. And yet, you've got these useful idiots on the left. That's all propaganda. No, that's the truth. What you're believing is the propaganda. It's modern day Holocaust deniers. At least with the Holocaust deniers, and I'm not saying anything to minimize that, at least they waited several decades to try and cover it up and try to deny it. Of course, it's absurd, but at least they waited a while is my point. Now they're denying what literally happened in real time right in front of their faces. But, brothers and sisters, the implications are stark. Hamas's crimes against humanity were not only committed against Israelis, but also against the Palestinian people. These people are always saying that they're standing up for the Palestinian people, the ones on the left. We got to stand up for listen, again, I'm going to say this. I stand up for all people. Human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. We all have human dignity. So this is a humanitarian issue. One that Hamas's own leadership doesn't attest to. Because Hamas's crimes, I'll say it again, they weren't just against humanity. They weren't only committed against Israelis, but also against the Palestinian people, whom they ostensibly claim to be representing. The fascist organization, Hamas, the fascist organization of Islamic Jihad, who worked with Hamas, they employed ISIS-grade tactics. Again, we've got the video to show it. And they did it fully aware. They did it fully aware that the attack on the Israelis went far beyond any military objective and would provoke an overwhelming Israeli retaliation. They knew what they were setting up. They just wanted to provoke Israel so they could accuse them of genocide and have the world turned against them. And again, in large measure, it works. It works, unfortunately. Sinwar's maniacal, evil ambitions were matched only by his ignorance. Israel doesn't need a nuclear weapon to inflict devastating harm on Gaza. And they wouldn't do that. Yet Hamas deliberately launched an intentionally genocidal assault, predicting and even banking on it that an Israeli response would devastate Gaza. I'm telling you, the blood is on the hands of the Palestinians, not the Israelis. The genocide, the accusations of genocide need to be laid at the feet of Hamas. It's right in their charter, as we've shared so many times. They deliberately launched, they intentionally launched their own genocidal assault, predicting it would devastate Gaza, predicting that the response could be weaponized for global sympathy. This is how evil Sinwar and the other Palestinian leaders were. So don't tell me about having, compassion or sympathy for the Palestinian people. Maybe I should reword that. We do have compassion and sympathy for the Palestinian people who are innocent, truly innocent people, who became the casualties and the collateral damage, the props for Hamas. Because the leaders of Hamas, Sinwar and all those others around him, they willfully sacrificed over 2 million Palestinians for a propaganda strategy. That fact alone should compel immediate and unconditional and unequivocal rejection of Hamas by anyone claiming to support Palestinian rights. And some people will feign that we do condemn Hamas. We do. They'll feign the words. But they still will reject the fact that by and large, 75 to 80% of the population supported Hamas. It's sobering. It's really sobering. I'm going to check the clock here. Phones are open. 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. I'll be back after this. What is the question? What is the answer? Jesus, of course, my friends. Music, it's what feelings sound like. The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. Welcome back, Andy White here. Tearing down strongholds. And sometimes it's a rough thing to do. Just tuning in, you're tuned in to Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. Phone lines are still open. Kind of quiet today. 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. I know it's quiet because maybe it's too sobering of a broadcast. It needs to be done. Like I said, I'm compelled to do it. I'm compelled to bring you as much information and truth as I can in the time limits that I have, because the voices out there are getting louder, the propaganda is getting nastier, and the power of the spirit of the age, the prince of the age, the prince of the power of the air. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, and greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world, no doubt. But we need to be a light. We need to speak the truth. Speaking the truth in love, of course, and exposing the lies, exposing the smears and the defamation, and standing for the truth. You know, Jesus, when he stood before Pilate, said, "I am the truth." He stands for truth. He said the Holy Spirit would be given to those, and the Holy Spirit would lead them into all truth. We need to be purveyors and pursuers of the truth. Wherever the facts may lie, follow the trail of truth. And some of these things are complicated. Some of these things, do get messy. But we need to research them out as best we can. All right, I got the phone is ringing. Faith FM, Andy speaking. Who's calling? Hold on, bro. I'll put you in. Hold on. Russell, you there?
Amen. Yes.
What's on your heart, bro?
Yeah, so Marsha was singing, what is the question, what is the answer? And, of course, the geopolitical landscape, which we've gone over today, is all that. I mean, right? Anti-Semitism is systemic, and we're probably just touching the tip of the iceberg, I think, of it, right? It's going to continue to grow, right? These are the days that we're living in. I always like to think of anti-Semitism like set on fire like hell, just like the tongue. There's no rational answer for it other than it's satanic. And so what is the question? What is the answer? And I don't mean to be redundant. I probably said something about this last week, but I think a lot of it could start. There's a couple things in our churches, How about a little Judeo-Christian textualization in our churches? It starts in our churches, right?
Oh,
we hear the word.
You're preaching
God
to the choir,
Sunday.
bro. You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, and I just want to, the audience, I just want to, confirm what I know you believe and why you're on the radio. How about a little first century church contextualization in our preaching? That'll go a long way because we have to educate the saints, right?
Mm-hmm.
The saints, with a lot of erroneous, I'll call it erroneous type doctrine, not understanding what needs to be understood here. And the other day I seen one of the Christian artists, I guess I can mention his name, right?
Sure, yeah, why not?
Yeah, Sean Foyt, however you say his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pleading with the church. Now, of course, on August 26th is a perfect example also of what the church needs to be doing. But I think it starts in preaching in our churches. It's so important, that contextualization. I can't move away from that. It needs to be had in the churches. But the other thing is what Sean Foyt or Fent or whatever his name is.
It's Foyt. Yeah, Foyt.
Yeah, he was saying is we got Islamists that are, 48,000 at a time.
In Dearborn, did you?
Yeah, in the church.
Did you see those videos?
Do we know how to mobilize? Now, I know some of us do. But how about the big states with all the big churches? You know, what's going on? They're sitting in their pews. What are they doing?
Well, some of them have their heads stuck in the sand. Some of them aren't really. What
is the question?
I don't know.
What is the answer? Right?
There's a lot. That's a big question, and there's a lot of different. I don't want to paint with a broad brush everybody, but a lot of the American church in general. I've shared this so many times through the years. We have a very myopic, Americanized, America-centric idea of Christianity and even the Word of God, and that's something that's been kind of inculcated into the American church. We think the kingdom of heaven, we think that God's eschatological blueprint revolves around America, when nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, it all centers and revolves around Israel. But we've been indoctrinated and inculcated with, again, the Americanized gospel, the Americanized. We have been blessed.
Put to sleep.
No question about it that we've been blessed, and there's a lot of things to say that are positive. But in the midst of the blessings, in the midst of the prosperity, we've also been. Well, just look at what how the Lord rebuked the Laodicean church. They were blessed. They had so much. They were given so much, and they said, "Oh, we are rich, and we are in need of nothing."
Yeah, great point.
And that's. But he rebuked them. And it was the church, and sometimes the church, and you go through the 7 churches in Revelation chapter 2, and sometimes we get accommodations for the good things we do, and from the Lord I'm talking about, and some things we get the rebukes and the chastisements that we need, and we need it all. We need to be encouraged in the things that we're doing right, and we need to be reproved in the things that we're doing wrong. And that's so that's true. That's definitely true.
Well, we mentioned the other day, you and I talked privately, right? I guess it was certainly was not on the radio, but just a private text or phone call. You weren't too aware at the moment, and that's okay. But I mentioned a sister who's evangelizing on a plane, and and yet she's rebuking the church because of many that are coming after her. But you know what? I'm starting to almost see her point, because we need to be out front, right? That's we're the ones called to go into the highways and the byways and compel them to come in.
Yeah, and that's that. Going back to a private discussion that we had, the audience wouldn't even know what we're talking about. But like we concluded, or I concluded at the end of it, was like, we just need to grab hold of every opportunity we can as the Lord leads us. Sometimes we'll get it right, and sometimes we'll get it wrong. I wasn't there in that situation. I don't know what it was all about, like I shared with you. The bottom line is this, whether she was right or whether she was wrong, she'll have to answer to the Lord for that. I happen to think, again, not knowing what the full situation was, I might have done the same thing. I don't know. Exploit the opportunity to preach the gospel. That was certainly her intent, anyway. Share the gospel, and
we can learn a few things from her. I think.
No matter what, we're we're going to share the gospel. Some are going to respond positively, and some are going to respond negatively. That's you know, that's the nature of the beast, so to speak. And we just we've been encouraging people to, if they want and if they feel led of the Lord, that it would be something for them to do, that the Lord would want them to do. Everyone, again, has got a different calling and a different walk to walk out. So we don't make blanket things. Yep. You know, part of the problem with so much of the churches is we get into these sectarianism type of things where we say, if you don't do this with us, then you know, you mustn't be a real Christian, or if you don't do this with us or believe like this, or you know, then you know you're not with us. And I've talked about that a lot. And we need to just respect one another's individual walks, as long as we're, you know, not walking in heresy and walking in deception. Of course, you know what I'm saying. But you know,
very true.
We you know, we're a team. Sometimes I like to compare.
Sometimes, you know, I think I can say this. You know, too mature men in the Lord. You know, sometimes we have to be. The Spirit of God frees us up from the assignments of men, and that's, you know, we don't want it, right, blatantly. Yeah. We don't want to be about the assignments of men, regardless of, you know, how it relates to the church. We want to be in step with Christ's assignment for us.
Right, and you just said it right there. The Lord's assignment for each of us as individuals, and we all have different assignments. So when we make a general appeal to people to say, hey, listen, a bunch of us are meeting down at the end of Main Street at Sag Harbor to stand with the Jewish community solely for the purpose of supporting them, solely for the purpose of encouraging them, so that they can see that, yes, there are Christians who are standing with them. For those of us who rightfully are standing up against anti-Semitism rhetorically, it's an opportunity to put feet to our rhetoric and actually do something and be a light and say, yes, we are going to push back against the anti-Semitism. We are going to push back. I mean, the whole, you know, one of the things that, and getting out there and seeing what's going on. I mean, one of the things that really kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word inspired, but one of the things that triggered me, so to speak, to want to do this broadcast today and bring out the facts of the genocide was looking at the other side of the street, the pro-Palestinian people with their signs and their placards saying "Stop the genocide," you know, and you know, it's just crazy, and they're just ignorant, and they bought into the big lie. That's why I'm calling this broadcast the big lie, the lie of genocide. It's a term that's gotten loosely thrown around, just like the term racist has gotten loosely thrown around by the left. You know, in the last 10, 15 years, everything is racist. Everything is racist. If you say that, you're a racist. And the term has been so watered down that it becomes almost meaningless. But there's a real meaning behind the word genocide. But they're throwing it around so much, they're watering it down. And by doing so, and as I shared in the first hour, they're not even talking about the actual and very real genocides that are going on in the world. Like what you never hear about what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghur Muslims in China, where there's literally modern day concentration camps filled with hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. I don't know what the number is, but that's a real genocide going on.
Wow.
And you never hear about it. Where are the protests against that Holocaust? Where are the protests against that genocide? Oh, wait a minute. They're not Palestinians. They're just, wait a minute. They're Muslims. You know what? What's being done to the Uyghur Muslims is just as atrocious as anything going against any other group of people. And they're being used in slave labor camps. They are literally, their organs, their body organs, livers and kidneys, and their organs are literally being harvested and sold to Muslim countries, by the way. And they're doing these organ transplants while the people are still alive. We're not talking about being an organ donor after you're dead. They're extracting. It is unbelievable. But how often do you hear about that? How often do you see that in the news? And you know why? This is the hypocrisy of this whole thing. These people who are saying, "Oh, we want to stand with the Muslims. They're a minority and they're oppressed." Well, none of that's really true either. But that's what they say. But here's what's going on with the Uyghurs. I'll bring it out there right now since we're talking about this. China is harvesting their organs because they're Muslims and selling them to Muslim countries for operations, because in Islam, if you need an operation or you need an organ, you can only accept one from a Muslim. So they're selling body parts. But again,
just unreal.
Where do you ever hear about that? Where's the protests? Where's the stop the genocide holding, regarding the Uyghurs, which is a real thing. Which is a real thing, and not a fake thing like they're accusing Israel of. This is the point of doing a broadcast like this, getting this kind of information out there.
You're taking the blinders off. I mean, you are. You're taking the blinders off, and it's well needed. We have to know, right, geopolitically, what's going on in our world as Christians.
And I want to tell you something. I'm not saying this to be quasi-spiritual or anything. I literally feel a spiritual oppression on me from the moment I started this broadcast. It's the powers and principalities.
And I can understand why.
It's a real thing, and the entire broadcast, I've been trying to push myself emotionally and spiritually and intellectually, push myself. And I'm being open. I'm being honest here. I'm being transparent here. I've been consciously trying to push myself through the literal oppression that I feel in the spiritual realm of bringing forth this broadcast today. And that's why I'm going to ask people who may stumble upon it on YouTube or Rumble, who may listen to it, to please go and share it. This broadcast is not meant to simply, what's the word I'm looking for? Be an exercise in information. Be an exercise in quote unquote intellectual prowess. No, it's meant to be a resource to fight against the garbage, to fight against the smears of these people that accuse Israel of doing things they aren't doing. Now, it's a war. Bad things happen in wars. Have there been? Because they'll always pull up. They will always pull up that one anecdotal situation where, Israeli, an IDF soldier was caught, doing this. But here's the thing: if he is, the Israelis, they prosecute.
Why did he do it?
No. They prosecute him. He gets arrested. He doesn't get away with it.
I see.
No, were any of the people that committed the atrocities on the Palestinian side against the Israelis on October 7th, were any of them prosecuted? No, they weren't prosecuted. No. They were paraded around as heroes. No. Yeah. So again, you've got this ridiculous, absurd double standard, and they'll pull out one bad apple and paint the entire IDF or paint the entire nation of Israel because of this one bad apple. But that bad apple gets prosecuted, and if found guilty, he goes to prison. He goes to an Israeli jail if he's proven guilty of something that is, not correct, not right.
Yeah, it's the spirit of Antichrist.
It's a question of justice. It's a question, these people on the left, they banty about, we stand for justice. No, not really. No, you stand for a very off-balanced version of your idea of justice. You really don't stand for justice in an even-handed way.
Understood. Yeah.
All right, bro. I'm going to let you go.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in. God bless. God bless. Phone lines are open, 631-725-2069. I'll be back after this with some closing thoughts. The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Andy White on the radio, tearing down strongholds. You are listening to Open Up the Doors. Integrity in broadcasting here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7, 93.3 in Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. Got a few minutes left. I can even, if you call in right now, I can even take in a really quick phone call if you'd like to call in. Get one last shot in. 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. I got room for one more quick call. In the meantime, let me get back to something just to kind of button up some thoughts here. I mentioned several times how after the attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023, that polls were taken amongst the Gazans, and they were still in support of many of them. The overwhelming majority of them were in overwhelming support of Hamas, and had even said if there was going to be an election, they would vote them back into power, which is a whole other thing, by the way. They're supposed to have elections, but Hamas stopped having elections something like 20-something years ago. I don't know the exact number, but they haven't had any elections in decades, even though they're supposed to. That's another issue. But regardless, the people that were polled said, oh, they would vote Hamas back in. So again, it's like who are innocent civilians to some degree? At what point are you not complicit when you're supporting, even if you're not actively doing something? Well, you actively voted these people in. And just one anecdotal, and there were many, but just one anecdotal report to bring, a story to bring. Back in those days, right after the war was initiated by Hamas, former Fox News anchor Melissa Francis told the Jerusalem Post about a face-to-face encounter that she had, an interview that she had with an Arab, quote-unquote, Palestinian family. And really the takeaway is it just speaks to the point. This family that she was interviewing, they told her without hesitation that the October 7th massacre against Israel was carried out with pride. Remember, it was a genocide. It was an act of genocide. That was their intent. And it was carried out with pride, according to this one family. This was not a Hamas terrorist being interviewed. It was a normative, whatever word that means, it was a normative, average family in Gaza. So again, remember, it's an important point. We need to remember that Hamas was voted into power, and even at the height of the Gazan war, polls showed that 70% of the Gazans would still vote for Hamas to govern them. Now, I don't know if that holds up today, 3 years later. That would be a good thing to look into. What are the polls showing now? I do know that it's going to be less because a lot of the population, especially near the last year, the last months of the war before a so-called ceasefire, that many civilian Palestinians were turning against Hamas. And that was a good sign. They were turning against Hamas so much that all of a sudden we were seeing the videos coming out where the Hamas militants that they had previously supported and voted for were now turning their guns on them. This is why when we go back to what I shared in the first hour about the death tolls of quote-unquote civilians, that roughly 35,000, 30,000 civilians, that number, a good large chunk of that number is not just from Israeli incursions and attacks where they were using them as human shields, but a lot of that number is also from Hamas turning on them as well. Faith FM, Andy speaking. Hey, Paula. Hold on. I'm going to put you in the system. I only got a minute, so you got to make it quick. Hello?
Okay.
Hold on.
Yes. Hi, Andy. Tell me when.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to, I know you're wrapping it up, and I just didn't get to hear the whole broadcast, but God just put on my heart to encourage the brothers and sisters in Christ, too, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, and maybe even said it throughout the broadcast.
I did say that earlier.
Yeah. Good. Let it not be that we wrestle not. Let's not just do that first part, but let's continue through that verse. And I just want to encourage my brothers, just keep praying that the love of God would reach them and everybody through the praying church and through His Holy Spirit.
Amen. That's Paula, thanks for calling in. That's
Okay, you're welcome. God bless you. Have a good day.
That's a great way to end the broadcast. We're down to our final minute. And I liked what Paula said. I did quote it earlier. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. I was sharing that because of the oppression I myself am feeling. But I like what Paula said. Some people just want to end it with "we wrestle not." I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to go down to the pro-Israel rally. I don't want to go to the prayer meeting. We wrestle not, and that's where they leave it. But we need to wrestle with them. Paul wasn't saying that we shouldn't wrestle with them. He's reminding us who and what we are dealing with, and that we need to contend earnestly for the faith and be the light that the Lord has called us to be. On that note, thanks for calling in, everybody who did call in. Paula, Russ, God bless. Everyone who's listening, God bless. I'm out of time. I'll be back next week. In the meantime, keep it right here on Faith FM. Be brave, be bold, stand firm in the faith. Stand firm in the faith, and let everything you do be done in love. Keep it right here on Faith FM.